So you had readers' response criticism about a poem must be magical by Jose Garcia Villa. And Villa he is a Filipino, and this poem itself talks about what a poem should be or the characteristics of a poem. So for instance, your interpretation about first a poem must be magical, that there were some literal interpretations about it, that it should be in itself magical. So which means it should give you the chance to travel, even though you're just sitting somewhere, but when you read it, you are in some place. So there is a place that your mind will create through a creative presentation of the poet. And this is for us to get away with reality, and or sometimes it's just a way or a form of entertaining our mind. So imagination wise, we can also create that on our end, depending on our interpretations as well as readers. Then musical as a seagull. There are two things or two ways in which we can analyze this. Musical would be because one of its characteristics is that it must have rhyme, rhyme and rhythm. It is also considered that songs are poems, but they have their melodies, they have tone, they have music itself, because it is lyrical poem. And if you notice, I put there letters, with colors, different colors, to provide you what this particular poem's rhyme scheme. So AA and the last GG. So AABBCCDDEEFFGG. Every couplet consists of one rhyme scheme. So magical and seagull rhymes together. So that's AA. If moving rhymes with seagull, then it could have been A. But because it is a different sound, doesn't rhyme, so it has its own or a different letter to represent another rhyme scheme, and so on and so forth. So others, if you notice, no, in a stanza, for four line, let's say there are four lines in one stanza, sometimes the four words towards the end rhymes together, so it's AA rhyme scheme, and then the other stanza would have another rhyme scheme, which is going to be BBBB. And it must be a brightness moving and hold secret a bird's flowering. These two lines suggest movement. So like brightness, this symbol or this image is about the sun. At 7 a.m., the sunlight is at a particular position, and it changes as it progresses to 12 noon and to 3 p.m. So there is movement. And hold secret a bird's flowering. What does this mean? It means there are two things here. It could be a bird, can soar high, or it means a flower from a bud, like a rose bud. It will change and bloom. So there's still movement. So what does it mean if poem must be able to provide movement? Because it's not stagnant. Otherwise, if it is static, it is prose. But because it is not stationary, that means it can move the author or the audience. Why? So if the author is sad, I would like to write poems, or I'd like to write stories, or whatever art form you would like. I'd like to paint something so that I can transform from being sad. Not really transform, but I can be able to move on from being lonely, the feeling of loneliness, to be happy or being happy, or from being depressed to someone who doesn't feel depressed anymore or doesn't feel anxious anymore. So people write poems to be able to move forward or to be able to move on. It must be slender as a bell, and it must hold fire as well. I'll discuss to you fire once I am at the last couplet. But what does slender mean? Slender means a poem must have its form. So there are poems that they really have their specific forms. Like it's about a tree and it's written in a form of a tree. And I'll give you another sample. So for example, this poem, if you will search Leaf Falls poem, this is exactly what you will see. And itself, this is the entire poem. What does it suggest? Now, if I will ask you to describe it, you would say this is written in an unusual way because it's not made of lines, not made of stanzas or something. It is written vertically. The form is vertical, and it's broken into 2 letters, 3 letters, or it's not really together with the other letters that would make up into a particular word that it suggests. Well, why is that? So look at the first one. It's number 1, parenthesis A, L-E-A-F for leaf, F-A-L-L-S, falls, parenthesis, a close parenthesis, and then the word one, and then L, and then the last part, I-N-E-S-S. The last part, if you will put them together with the word one, and then the letter L, and then I-N-E-S-S, that you would come up with the word loneliness. Why loneliness? Leaf falls. How many leaves are falling? There's only one. And one is the saddest number. If you fall, you know you have friends, but they're not falling with you. They can advise you. Your family can advise you. You were not able to get what you want, or you were not able to succeed. It's just you falling. So there's a little bit of loneliness, of sadness in this poem. But the way it is crafted, it also feels like the letters itself is falling like what it's trying to convey, like one leaf falling. It could be from 2 to 1, meaning you have this tree and the leaf, so you're 2. You are with this moment. You are with these people. But then of all leaves, it's just you falling. So in a particular situation, it's just you who will fall. Okay, that's a sample of a different form of or a form of poems. And I think it is interesting to have it written this way. You can also search about comma poet and who is this comma poet. So if he's a comma poet, then he was able to make comma poems. What's in a comma poem? Every after a word, may it be content word or not, may it be a preposition or just linking words or no, anything. There is a comma every after a word. Like in, comma, my, comma, dream, comma. So why do we say that? In, my, dream. That's just a sample. So this suggests that no matter how big or small a particular word to use, they are important. So it provides emphasis. Those pauses gives us meaningful pause to provide emphasis, importance, that everything is valuable in this poem. Wisdom of bows. And it talks about bow and arrow. Just like when you are about to shoot using bow and arrow, you have your target. You have your message, your target message, what you would like to transfer or share. And you also have your target audience. It must kneel like a rose. Many was able to get this, that kneel is humility. But what does rose symbolizes? So it symbolizes that, for example, there are people we look up to. And imagine if those people we look up to, may it be our parents or friends, neighbors, or speakers, or teachers that we look up to. And imagine if they are going to kneel in front of you. And it feels so gratifying for us. It feels so good that they also give the same respect, even though we look up to them. So, in other words, some poems, they are going to be very successful to make it internationally, to make it to be able to win a lot in the literary world. So no matter how far this particular poem gets, we must be humble as a poet, and the poem itself must transcend humility, or must possess humility, being humble always. It must be able to hear the luminance of dove and deer. I think this is the most, the couplet that a lot of us are having hard time. What does it really mean? Even the author himself said sometimes authors cannot provide a perfect interpretation or an explanation about the line, dove and deer is good and bad. It must be able to hear. Once you see, or once you read something, a poem, you can tell what it's trying to illuminate, what it's trying to tell. Is it good? Is it bad? Do you think all poems are made out of love, happiness, and fun? No. So there are poems that are about a grieving mother, poems about loneliness, poems about depression. But behind every poems, they all have their own intention, positive intention. No matter how good or bad, there is always an intention for positivity. Like, I am depressed, my whatever cat died, or my dog died, or somebody close to me died. I would like to write a poem about my sadness, so that I can move forward, or so that I can share what I feel, and share the same grief, share the same feelings to other people who are also going through the same situations I am going through. It must be able to hide what it seeks like a bride. So what does it mean? Like what we mentioned, and you guys also mentioned during the discussion, that the meanings are hidden. It's not straightforward. Every one of us, we have different interpretations and different understanding of the hidden meaning of the poem, and what it's trying to suggest. It's because it's like a bride. Number one is, bride has its own covering that you have to unveil them in order to reveal them. The last couplet, and overall, I would like to hover God smiling from the poem's cover. All poems the writer himself is Jose Garcia Villa, is a Christian. And I think most of us, I think we're Christians. But if you are not a Christian, you have other religion, you have different religion, you also have your own God. And every time you write poem, it must have positivity. It must be God driven if we have the religion. If we don't, it must have positivity in it. Okay. Now we'll go back to fire, because Villa is he himself is a Christian, and fire in Christianity meaning spirit. It must be alive. It must have spirit. Okay, so notice there are poems that were written in 1800s, in 1900s, but when we are going to study them, or when we are going to read about a certain poem written long ago, we could somehow connect to it because it has its own spirit. And that ends our discussion about Poem Must Be Magical by Jose Garcia Villa.